Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at a very important press conference held by DG ISPR. Of course, this is with reference to disclosing facts about the incidents of May 9th, which has been called previously also as a black chapter in the history of Pakistan, in which we saw a lot of riots and attacks on public property, including military installations and the Jinnah House in Lahore, following the arrest of the PTI chairman. And this is important, especially in terms of what we're looking at in terms of what the army has been targeted, not just by the political party, but also moving forward in terms of people talking about accountability and whether or not everybody involved will be seeing the consequences. And so in a process of self-accountability, the DG ISPR Major General Ahmed Sharif has clarified that 3 army officers, including a lieutenant general, have been sacked from their jobs, and then 3 major generals and 7 brigadiers have been proceeding with disciplinary proceedings, and that has also been completed against them. And there's many more, including family members of senior army officers who are also facing trial. And this is important in terms of what was being said, especially in the aftermath of the incidents of May 9th, that there will be consequence, that everybody who is responsible and involved will be brought to book, and whether that is with reference to the military or any political party or the general public, the same course of action is going to be followed, and that there is going to be a respect for the sanctity and the sacredness of the Constitution, which again was reiterated by the DG ISPR today, saying that the people who are being tried under the military courts have all the legal rights, and they will be punished according to the Constitution, and they also have the legal rights and will also have the right to appeal in the high courts or Supreme Courts of Pakistan. It's also important to note, however, the kind of political involvement that has been referred to by the DG ISPR as well, without naming any political party. He talked about the planners and masterminds of those behind the incidents of May 9, saying that it was those people who were responsible for creating a misperception, for instigating the people against the army and the establishment for many months. And the investigation that the DG ISPR also points out has been held up till now, points towards the fact that this was something that was planned. It was a conspiracy against Pakistan, and this is a thing that is undoubted, and that this is something that has been going on for quite many months for nefarious political designs. And this is important, especially when we talk about accountability at the political front, whether or not leadership or the current chairman of a political party that is being held responsible for these incidents will also be facing the consequences. And this is going to be something that we'll explore further in our show today in terms of the kind of revelations that have been made by the DG ISPR and what they mean in terms of the future course of action, how the military courts that have been clarified by the DG ISPR that have been going on, about 17 are currently acting, and about 102 miscreants have been are being tried against in those courts, and including, he says, many more that are going to follow. So we'll talk about all of this and the kind of narratives that have been stressed upon in the aftermath of May 9th, especially against the military installations and army, and talking about human rights violations. That was another aspect that was highlighted, especially in terms of the people who were leaving Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf and moving forward, and claiming that there have been human rights violations which have been denied by the DG ISPR, saying that many were fake videos and photos that are being used again for a false narrative that is being established. But he stressed upon the relationship that the people and the army enjoy, and is saying that the people have their trust in the sanctity and the honor of the sacrifices that the army has been giving for quite some time now, including also throughout this whole time where many intelligence operations are continuing and many soldiers have been sacrificing their lives. So we'll talk about what the DG ISPR said today and what this means in terms of future course of action, especially against the miscreants, and then of course with the political leadership of various political parties. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi. We've also been joined in the studios by Hafiz Ahsan Khokhar, who's Advocate Supreme Court of Pakistan. We've joined online by Brigadier Raashid Wali Janjua, Director Research IPRI, and Rana Maqbool Ahmed Senator PML-N. Thank you very much, everyone, for being a part of the discussion today. And let me start with you, Janjua Saab. The situation, of course, whenever we talk about the aspect of accountability or consequences, there is this expectation, of course, that there is no discrimination, that everybody who's responsible, whether it is somebody who belongs to the military establishment, a political leadership, or part of the courts or the general public, is not above the law. And this is especially important when we talk about such a black chapter in the history of Pakistan in terms of what has happened on the 9th of May. And this sort of self-accountability has been stressed upon by the DG ISPR today, claiming that no rank or no affiliation with the military is being cited as a reason for not proceeding with any action against the army officers, and that's important. But do you think that when we talk about this particular aspect moving forward, this does make a difference in terms of how the public is viewing the military courts proceeding forward, how the self-accountability is actually ensuring that everybody who was in fact responsible as part of May 9th is being brought to book?
Because self-accountability is something that is very important. And this gives an air of authenticity to the whole process of accountability. And all those who were involved in 9th May attacks, they would be, taken to the task according to the law of the land. But there were many apprehensions being expressed about the military courts, about the process of, prosecution, and whether this process would be fair or not. And there were also some element of ambivalence amongst the fence sitters who were just viewing this process with a lot of trepidation. But this clear articulation of the Army's viewpoint about its own internal accountability, I think it should lay to rest all those rumors and doubts. Because if there is a strong system of accountability that is holding its own to account, and it's not sparing even the 3 stars for abdication of responsibility, and there are 3 stars, 2 stars who are being proceeded against, I think this is an indication of the seriousness with which Army views this 9th May incident, and its seriousness about holding everybody accountable across the social divide, whether somebody is influential, whether somebody is well linked, whether somebody was part of the armed forces, or whether somebody was very influential, plugged in with the influential quarters. So that is going to be of no avail. And this is the message. There are 3 tenets of this message: proportionality, deterrence, and retribution. On retribution part, it's DG ISPR has made it very clear that no quarters would be given, and there's no question of letting somebody off, provided he's been tried and has been proven guilty as per the law of the land. And deterrence means that if action is taken, retribution is taken to its logical end, and the people see the justice being done, then the recurrence of such incidents in the future, they stop. And proportionality, that everything should be proportional to the offense under the constitution of Pakistan, and there should be recourse to appeal as per the law of the land. And I'm sure this is whole message, the way it was packaged and the way it has been conveyed. And the actions speak louder than words. No amount of press conferences would do any wonders if the action, it's not backed up by action. And the action means that those people who crossed the Rubicon on 9th of May and resorted to violent acts, those would be given exemplary punishments proportionate to their offenses, and that would act as a deterrence for anybody who's trying to even think on those lines in future. And then it will assuage the concerns of rank and file, which are quite agitated at the moment, seeing the kind of violent acts against the symbols of honors, the monuments of the martyrs who have consecrated this every part of this land by their blood, and this is an indication that army means business, and the rest of the institutions, I'm sure, would follow suit.
Rana Sahab, whenever we talk about May 9th, of course, there is a stress on consequence and accountability. And I understand that's important, and it's great to hear from the DG ISPR as well that that's being done in all quarters. And it's important, especially when we talk about holding everyone accountable, especially in the incidents of May 9th. But in the way that we want this to proceed forward, it may still not be clear exactly how the political elements involved in these incidents will be held accountable, especially in terms of the leadership, especially in terms of the PTI chairman. Exactly what sort of future consequence is there, and what sort of plan of action is there? I understand military courts are in order, but what really are we looking at in terms of, as Janjua Sahab was speaking, proportionate punishment according to the crime? What may that be?
Thank you, Salam. Islam to every participant, honorable participant. As far as this ambiguity is concerned, I really agree with you because it has not been clarified so far. A reason being that there is much delay in investigation and the prosecution getting commenced. For example, you say the leadership, the real who made all these things in a very provocative manner, and he has been always resorting to derogatory language against the army and against the army commanders. So we are partly responsible. We gave him the latitude to do this, and so much so he went for desecration on the Holy Prophet, and he quoted agents who were so influential and moneyed people. This was a planned program. We didn't check him. And once he was calling names to the army generals and calling them Mir Jafar and Mir Sadiq and Animal and whatnot, he was never taken to task. So during the process, he got so much habitual of hitting below the belt against the protectors of the country, and he resorted to this extreme position of waging war against the country, and not only waging war, causing so much of disaffection and contempt against the country. So no doubt the cases and the components of the offences are alarming. But I'm really surprised to see this once there is so much of overwhelming evidence against the person you are talking. No action has been initiated against him. For example, if we analyze the forensic evidence related to him, and identically the sonographic evidence, the recordings, and the voice matching, and the circumstantial evidence, graphic evidence is rampant, and electronic pieces of evidence, not only electronic, ocular, and fashionable pieces of evidence, and the evidence of criminal conspiracy and abetment. It's an overwhelming evidence. What for we are waiting? Why didn't the prosecution did start so far? That is my question as well as a student of law. Commander Saab has very elaborately dilated on that. But if he's in a position to communicate and convey this message as well, that you have to now expedite your process of prosecution. Of course, it will be for the sake of justice. Already they have been assured by the army and by the government that no innocent will be touched even with a long pole, but no guilty will be overlooked and spared. So that formula and that principle is to be adopted without much of hesitation. Otherwise, it will be further making the issue more controversial and more ambiguous. As far as the objections of certain segments of the society are concerned, most of them are irrelevant, And I assure you, today's press conference by the General DG ISPR is so abundantly clear. It's a message for the parties, political parties. It's a message for media, the segments of media who are genuinely criticizing this process law, and it's a message for the honorable courts as well. So he was so clear, and I hope that there's a lot of commitment, impregnable commitment for this clarification and announcements they have been making. So my emphasis will be no more time is to be wasted for the sake of prosecution.
Right, absolutely. And I'll take your question forward, Rana Saab, to Hafiz Saab in the studios as well to help us understand that. Hafiz Saab, according to Rana Saab, the situation, especially in terms of evidence that exists, is ample, and that there needs to be no doubt or no delay in moving forward, especially when we talk about political leadership's involvement in the incidents of May 9th. But I want to understand the strength and the substance of that evidence. Exactly what does that count in the eyes of the law, and how significant is the evidence that has been collected so far, and how is that evidence then being directly linked to the incidents of May 9th? I understand what the DG ISPR spoke about in terms of this being planned over months, and that the political party or the leadership that we're talking about has been part of speaking against the army and the establishment and instigating the same from the public. But how will that evidence be actually linked to the actual crime, and what is required then for this to move forward in terms of accountability?
Sana, thank you so much for inviting me, and nowadays it is a very legal and constitutional debate is going on in Pakistan. There is two aspects. One aspect is what is the law of land, and why and when and how the civilians can be tried under the Military Act. This is the one aspect. And the second aspect would be about the evidence, which will have definitely the authorities have, and they will produce before the trial court established under the Military Act, and all the laws like the Criminal Procedure Code and the Qanun-e-Shahadat, they are there. And the prosecution has a right to produce all the evidence in support of their claim. And the accused who has been alleged under the charge, he has every right to defend his case and produce any evidence or to contradict the evidence produced by the prosecution. But the most important thing is issues now is that whether the civilians can be tried under the military law or not. This is a prime question which is being debating on since 9th of May 2023, and the people are discussing about it. Some are saying it is illegal, unconstitutional. Some are saying that people should have been tried under the anti-terrorism law. So for clarity of the situation is that the 1952 Act was promulgated by the federal government at that time, and there was no provision in the law where the civilians can be tried under the Military Act. The first amendment was made in 1967 through Defence Services Pakistan Ordinance number 3 and 4, and two amendments were made in the Military Act 1952. One is relating to the Section 2D, where provided an exception that the civilians can be tried under the Military Act if they found involved in two categories. One is categories relating to a connivance and the actual participation with the employees of the military against the national security issues, and second was that if they found involved in the Official Secret Act 1923. And then there was another amendment in Section 59. The first time the interpretation was made by the Civil Offence and the Criminal Code, and it has been defined under the Military Act that if someone is found involved under the Pakistan Penal Code and simultaneously he is subject to the provisions of the Army Act, so the provisions of the Army Act would prevail and has an overriding effect over the other laws. That is the Section 59 of the Army Act. Both these provisions were challenged first before the Peshawar High Court, and there was a decision on that the civilians can be tried under the Military Act, and then the matter went to the Lahore High Court, and finally it landed under the 1973 Constitution to the Supreme Court of Pakistan.
Right.
And Supreme Court of Pakistan in 1975 decided a case very well known. It is Brigadier FPLE, and it was held in by the Supreme Court of Pakistan, the then Chief Justice of Pakistan, Justice Ahmed Rahman, that the civilians can be tried under the Military Act, and the provisions in introduced through the ordinance number 67 is not ultra vires, and the legislatures had the authority to promulgate. It was not against the fundamental rights, and that practice still continues by the Supreme Court of Pakistan. Then there was a judgment in 96, and the Supreme Court hold that the fair trial doesn't mean that it should be outside the ambit of the administrative military court. If a trial is undertaken by a military court, it is not a violation of the principles of fair trial. Then it was decided in 2007 Supreme Court, it was held by the Supreme Court that civilians can be tried, and then the matter went to the Supreme Court of Pakistan again under Article 184(3) of the Constitution in the 21st Constitution Amendment, and the matter was challenged before there by the District Bar Association Rawalpindi, and the matter was decided by the Supreme Court by the full court, and 11-6 was the ratio of the judgment, and they hold that there is no violation of the independence of judiciary, there is no violation of the executive to the judicial functions, and the parliament had the competency to legislate the amendments. And then finally the matter went to the 5 members bench in 2017, and again Supreme Court had decided that the civilians can be tried under the Military Act. So this is the checkered history of Pakistan since 1967, and this is not exceptional. Every country in the world has a military law, and the military law means to control the administrative areas of a military employment, and there are certain exceptions as well. There are 36 countries all over the world where the civilians can be tried under the Military Act.
Absolutely, I understand that, Hafiz, but I'll come back to that and discuss the nuances, especially with regards to evidence again, and then especially in terms of what we're dealing with and the role of the military courts in that matter. But thank you for that history as well. Farrukh, when we talk about this current situation, I understand that the self-accountability has been emphasized by the DG-ISPR today, but I also want to further understand where that actually was located, especially in terms of what sort of actions or accountability exists from the military establishment as well. According to what has been said, there was also discussion around disciplinary proceedings regarding the security and honoring the military installations such as the Jinnah House as well, in the sanctity of those areas. But beyond the aspect that there was a lack in terms of security or there was a security breach, do you think that the self-accountability of the military establishment has gone beyond that in terms of whoever has been held accountable, especially in terms of perhaps also being in part with how this was actually conducted and planned?
Right. Sana, thank you very much for the opportunity. I understand that we have a bigger panel today, so I will try to keep my comments as concise as possible. But I wanted to actually answer the question that you raised, and I wanted to compliment Hafiz Saab also. I think that with the fluency he actually repeated the history. Had you actually been playing visuals accordingly, it would have made a great documentary also. But having said that, you know, this aspect that you are pointing to, I mean, it has been part of the grapevine. Every journalist, every person, especially the conspiracy pundits, keep on actually debating this. So it was very clear today that army wanted to set certain things clear. One, you know, the plan of the conspirators on that day was essentially to create a scene. First of all, to provoke army into some kind of reaction, and had some people been killed, they were actually looking for bodies so that they could have actually used those bodies to create a bigger crisis in the country, eventually leading to some kind of disruption, right? So army by you know premeditation did not actually try to engage the people the way it could have, and that's why those people, you know, were not killed, and they went away with a lot of things, right? After that, there are 2 or 3 aspects that are important. Why are then people, office bearers, being tried? Those office bearers then would be actually following some kind of strategy, right? But that is not how this is supposed to be, because although media kept on actually using this to actually try to create some kind of contradiction and to say that there is some kind of contradiction, it isn't. What exactly is the problem here? One, why did those people actually reach that place in a way that they managed to do whatever they wanted, right? You're talking about the last, level of defense where you actually strike back. But there was a lapse from those people who were actually let go, who were being punished, right? So there's no contradiction. A, it was a good strategy. Had there been few bodies, God forbid, there, and mind you, no matter who was doing what, all were Pakistani citizens. Had they died, and it is clear that their party clearly does not care about their lives, because they have been trying to play politics from model town to recently a special person who was killed recently. If you remember when Zaman Pak operation was going on at that time, and that person died, they tried to play politics and it came in public eye. So after all that, I am grateful that nobody was killed, right? After that, what happens? If there is somebody who was responsible for any kind of failure or some kind of sympathies or some kind of, support, they were punished and they are being punished. After doing this, army demands one thing from you. We have taken care of our people who were under, our control. Now let us see how does this entire system punishes the people who actually broke the law but who were civilians, right? And this is what I've been saying to you when I kept on criticizing Supreme Court, that by being partisan, the courts of Pakistan have allowed their image or their credibility to crumble, because then there are source authorities who are going to think that they can do a better job than this. And this is exactly what is happening. Any person who is actually tried in the military court will have a legal recourse. By the way, those matters are also referred to military court by whom? Civilian courts. And after that, they will have the recourse in the High Court and the Supreme Court. So what is all this propaganda and fuss? We know every time this propaganda has been played, and that will continue to play till the time we actually quash it. So it is about time. I think our Army, DG ISPR's press conference was very timely, and it has clarified what Army intends to do with people who were wrong, and it is part of the state. What exactly does the state actually intend to do with all those miscreants who wanted to create some kind of civil war-like situation that day?
Right, absolutely. Janjua Saab, the DG ISPR also mentioned the fact that despite whatever false narratives were there, and despite the propaganda, especially in terms of human rights violations post the incidents of May 9th, was talked about, is something that could have tarnished the relationship between the public and the military, but it hasn't, and that the people in general understand the sacrifices the army has rendered and continues to do so. But I want to also understand your take on it, whether or not this is actually the case in terms of it seeing any possible crack or rift between the relationship that the people actually have with the military. Do you think in the general public eye the sanctity of the military establishment is unharmed? Because of course when we talk about months and months of planning and instigating the people towards incidents of violence on May 9th, and then of course the kind of rhetoric that has been used, and then post May 9th the kind of videos and photos, however fake, have come forward, this has been a contributor to the way that people perceive the military establishment. Do you think that there is a serious concern here, or do you think that is a very low population?
Interestingly, Sana, there was a Gallup survey in 2022 and 21, and according to which the public reposed their maximum trust in armed forces above all other institutions and all other organs of the state. The public still reveres, the silent majority still reveres armed forces. It is cognizant and appreciative of their sacrifices. But in the partisan politics, once there is a polarization and the politics is taken to the level of a cult, therein the problem arises. The cult followers see no reason, they hear no reason, they speak no reason. We have examples of cults like Branch Davidian cult in United States, where one day the cult leader says that, okay, everybody commits collective suicide, and they commit suicide. Then there's a famous case of People's Temple, where 1,000 people, they committed mass suicide because their minds were so poisoned, and in their understanding, their leader was a divinity. So they raise it to the level of a cult, a divinity. A divinity cannot be touched by the laws of the land. Otherwise, it was a very simple undertaking, because if a leader like Zulfikar Ali Bhutto could be incarcerated, and later on he suffered also, what was the reaction? Did somebody come and attack army installations? There were obviously protests, but not of that kind. This is something very, very insidious and different than hitherto. This was a kind of a political cultism. And when you resort to cultism, there is no rationality, there is no reason, and seemingly rational people, they lose their rationality and resort to acts of madness. Now, when the madness is untempered by the fear of retribution, tragedies occur. Why I say this? Because poison was injected into young, impressionable minds, and a young, angry cohort, along with the middle class, which had aspirations for a change in the society. They were brainwashed into a state of mind wherein any legal act against their leader was construed as blasphemy. So they went and willingly resorted to the acts of violence, and they had at the back of their mind this feeling that probably no retribution would be meted out to them, because perhaps certain organs of the state were at their back. Later on, the quick bails from the courts, it lent credence to some of the rumors that perhaps some of the rioters and those who resorted to acts of violence, their masterminds, they had some kind of encouragement. Now, this is something that we need to fight. The misuse of a political narrative to create a kind of a poisoned narrative, use of social media, weaponizing of social media to create a hate narrative that blinds the alternate reality, create a virtual reality, an echo chamber of cultism, and that ultimately translates into violent acts. And I think this is where the nation, the whole of the society, needs to look into.
Right. Rana Sahab, another question, responding to another question, the DG ISPR also spoke about when he was asked about the possibility of any flexibility regarding a dialogue or any sort of conversation with the PTI chief or the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. He talked about how the army supports all the Hakiki parties, and that is something that is part of something that the army thinks is worthy of respect. And I want to understand what your take is on this statement in terms of what the DG ISPR was referring to, and then what will be the move forward, considering especially the party, even if we remove the chairman from it.
What I understand, Sana, that it was a simple answer by him that they are not prepared to have negotiations with the party chief because there is so much of overwhelming proof of his guilt, and nobody can even think of having negotiations with him. And if at all somebody endeavors to do that, there will be great rebuff from the nation at large, because it is not acceptable for the nation that the crime they have committed, and especially against the martyrs and against the monuments of the martyrs. And let's understand the status of martyrs in the eyes of the Muslims. मेरे खाक व खून से तूने ये जहां किया है पैदा, सिलाए शहीद क्या है तो पुताबे जावेदाना. So that is the status of a martyr is immortal and eternal, and so sacred that one can't resort to sacrilege against the martyrs' entities. And likewise, one said, इतने नादात होने थे जहाँ से गुजरने वाले, इतने नादान तो न थे जहाँ से गुजरने वाले, ना से हो बंद करो रह गुजर तो देखो. The loftiness and the sanctity of their mission is to be respected and regarded and looked up to with great grace. So any person who tries to play with these sacred issues, they have to pay through nose. May it be the party leader or may it be the party worker. May it be the member of the cult and may it be the ordinary citizen. May it be an old lady or young lady. They have to pay through nose. And if we don't do that, then we are putting some guilt against the nation ourselves. So there is no scope for any negotiations. Yes, this is all right if the really criminal component of the party is segregated from the party and party is taken over by some sensible people and who are acceptable as far as their past record is concerned, no harm, because even their opponent parties are not thinking of getting it altogether annihilated. They say that party should continue, but party should be led by the sensible people who are there to serve the nation, the interests of the nation, not to create disorder and commotion and not to generate contempt and disaffection against the society and against the people and against the armed forces. If you try to insult and humiliate armed forces, you mean you don't want your country to be properly protected and looked after. And under our conditions, geographical conditions and strategic conditions, the army will have to have its great importance because they are the crusaders. They are protecting the nation. And once we have such a virulent, heartless, contiguous state like India, it's all the more important that army is respected and looked after properly by the nation, and looked up to them with respect and regard.
Absolutely, Rana Sahab. I'll move on to Hafiz Sahab. Previously, Hafiz Sahab, we were discussing the establishment of military courts, and I understand that it's part of how we move forward with the Constitution. And again, the sanctity of the Constitution is also being upheld, as was also stated by the DG ISPR. But I want to then understand where the criticism is coming in from regarding the military courts and the trial proceeding with the miscreants involved in the incidents of May 9th. If there are legal rights, if this is part of the Constitution, if there is a right to appeal in a High Court or Supreme Court, then what really is the concern here, especially when we talk about the incidents of May 9th? And secondly, if you would also comment on what sort of evidence will be needed to link this with political involvement.
Sanam, the one point I tried to make on it, that all the three acts, the 52 Military Act, the 53 Pakistan Air Force Act and the Pakistan Navy Ordinance 1961, they have the constitutional protection under Article 8B of the Constitution of Pakistan, because these laws have been made part of the fourth schedule of the Part 1 of the Constitution, which says that these laws cannot be struck down on the ground of the violation of the Article 8, which says that if the law is inconsistent or against the fundamental rights, the court has the power to strike down. So the court's powers are very limited. They are only there to interpret the law, but they can't strike down the law until there is a clear-cut exception provided in the Constitution. And more importantly, there is settled principles of law by the Supreme Court of Pakistan. They have upheld these provisions, but they are sitting on the evidence and the process which is being taken by the military courts through in a judicial review under Article 199 of the Constitution, and then the matter goes to the Supreme Court of Pakistan under Article 184(3) of the Constitution for the validation of the conviction. And there are a number of judgments where the High Court and the Supreme Court has struck down the convictions given by the military court, and there are so many judgments where the Supreme Court, the High Court has upheld the convictions given by the military courts. And most importantly, another issue which is very, very important, which is pending before the Supreme Court of Pakistan, and the Supreme Court has decided that in pursuance of the 21st constitutional amendments, the military courts were established, and these courts which are working now, which is pointed out that there are 17 military courts working in all over Pakistan. They are not the special court, they are already there. But those courts which established through Constitutional Amendment 21st, they people tried, and their sentences were finally brought to the High Court Peshawar, and all the convictions were set aside, and then the matter is pending before the Supreme Court of Pakistan since long, the Supreme Court has to decide these cases on priority basis on the point that whether the conviction or the process taken by the military court is legal or not legal. This is another issue. But the other side is that if, for the sake of argument, that if something is going on and initiated by the military authorities under the Military Act 1952,
right,
the law of evidence is the same, which is being applied in a regular criminal court, and the law of procedure, which is the criminal court is proceeding, is also the same, which is acting upon by the military courts. So the only difference issue is that it is headed by the military authorities, and there is speedy, the process of the conviction. But simultaneously, in the regular sides, there are two appeals. One is the High Court, and the second the Supreme Court. But here in the military court is when is appeal before the appellate tribunal, and then you can file. The Supreme Court has hold that against the conviction you can go to the High Court and you can come to the Supreme Court of Pakistan.
Right,
but
absolutely.
Ultimately,
so
the High Court and the Supreme Court has authority to see the legality, validity, and the evidence given.
I'll move on now to the next discussion regarding, of course, we're short on time. The big question, Farrukh, still remains as to what will be the future of the current PTI chairman, and how moving forward, whatever sort of accountability process we're looking at will then mean for him.
Right, Sana, this is a very important question, because more or less everybody keeps on talking about it. Somehow our elite actually set the narrative in this country, and we have seen something incredible about them, particularly the pro-PTI elite, that they have this cognitive dissonance, that they can turn off various parts of their brain whenever they want. They can be very aggressive about the same point today as if it is a matter of life and death, and tomorrow they might be defending the same thing from the other side of the divide. So all this goes on, and so naturally they have clearly obsessed the entire media, punditry, and perhaps some segment of the society also, who keep on talking about this matter. So there's a very simple answer. You know, the fact that somebody is a former prime minister, the fact that somebody is head of a party, should it change how the law actually, treats them? Who used to say that there should be one system in the country, not two, right? Now suddenly they keep on demanding that they have special privileges while others don't. So this is a very clear case of these, principal stance of the state. Now the biggest problem, I think, is that there are too many moving parts, right? Especially when you talk about people who are actually fighting, who were fighting on the streets. They have been apprehended, and naturally through them a case builds onto, regarding the main culprit who might be responsible, who is being called the mastermind. So eventually that chairman of PTI, that former prime minister, will also be taken to courts, and he will also have to face the music. Now which court, I can't tell, but I think that we all are guessing in the right direction.
All right. Thank you very much, Farrukh, for that. And thank you very much, Hafiz, for joining us in the studios. Thank you, Mr. Raashid, Wali, Janjua, and Rana, Maqbool, Ahmed, for being part of the discussion as well. That's all we have time for. Of course, much remains to be seen. But what is clear from the DG ISPR's press conference today is that there will be accountability and there will be consequences that's going to happen across all quarters, whether it is the military establishment, the political leadership, or anyone else, and that there will be no discrimination under the law. And that's good news. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll see you tomorrow.